Bad to the Bone. That was my song, okay? Bad to the Bone, because I knew after my mother took her own life, I was bad to the bone.
Right.
Is it not on? Oh, sorry. After my mother took her own life, there it goes. I knew I was bad to the bone. I was 17, going on 18. And I had just got home from my Friday evening. I was a high schooler. I had gone to school dance. Before that, I had gone to my job. In those days, high schoolers had part-time jobs. I was 6 till 9, then I went to school, then I came home, and excuse me. Here. So I'm shaking. This is the first time I've gotten real personal. I usually just talk about my research, but so here I was in bed trying to go to sleep because I had to get up the next day to go to my 9 a.m. open the store. That was my job. And as I was just dozing off to sleep, my parents weren't home. I knew where they were. I heard the door rattling open. I heard them stumble in. It had been snowing. They were stamping their feet. And of course they were fighting because whenever they came home from the pub, we used to call it the beverage room in Canada. It's called the beverage room, or the beer hall. They came in and they were always fighting. It was Friday night. I knew that. It was like, oh, again, okay, I'm just gonna have to quiet down. I'm just gonna have to try and go to sleep because I gotta get up early in the morning. And they were yelling and they were talking about beer. My mother wanted another beer. Al, where'd you put that beer? Never mind, go to bed, Gladys. God damn it, I want another beer before I go to bed. Gladys, go to bed. And then it got real quiet. You know what was going on. And I thought, okay, she's gonna go to bed. I'm just gonna go to sleep. So wait till that ringing stops. Thank you. Oh, is this the phone? They're trying to find that phone. Okay, where was I? Okay, I was just trying to go to sleep. And I thought, okay, everything's gonna be okay. It's quieted down. Usually when things got quiet, that meant it's good. So I was going off to sleep, and then I heard my mother just yell at the top of her lungs, "You'll be sorry!" And the door slammed. Wait, what door was that? That's the door they just came in. Is she going out? And it happened to be snowing. It was January in Toronto, January 29th exactly, 1972. There's a foot of snow on the ground. It was cold outside. I know that because I drove home from the dance in the snow, and you have to be really careful. I thought, what the hell is she doing now? Now I was awake. Now I was awake, and now I was worried. Where's she going? Well, obviously Dad would have heard her. He'll go after her. It's okay. I'm just gonna go back to sleep because I have to get up and go to work in the morning. Then I started thinking, well, I won't hear Dad. What am I gonna do? I was in bed. I was warm. I had to get up in the morning. It was snowing outside. I need to get dressed and go out there. But my whole body just screamed, no, we're not going out there. You're not going to get involved in this. My brain was saying, are you kidding? You want to go out there and confront your mother? She is drunk and disorderly. Who knows what she's going to do? And as I had to lay there wondering and worrying what to do, all of a sudden, the next thing I knew, my alarm was going off. It was morning. I'd never slept through the night before. I was amazed. I woke up and it was morning. Because when I was a little girl, we learned in elementary school, smoking in bed is very dangerous. If your parents smoke in bed, tell them to stop it. So I used to wake up around 3 o'clock every middle of the night, morning, and smell smoke, because my mother smoked in bed every night. The smell would wake me up. I would wait till it was no longer there, and then I would go to sleep. So the fact that I slept through the night was very weird. I felt good, I got up, and I opened my blackout curtains, and the sun was shining on this beautiful crystalline snow. It was the most beautiful day. Blue sky, gorgeous, diamonds sparkling, 2 feet of snow all over everything. And then I remembered, where's Mom? Shit, excuse me, but I may say some four-letter words. I was frozen, and I thought, well, she must have come in, and I went to her room. My mom and dad didn't sleep together. I went to her room, the bed was untouched. So I ran into my dad's room and I said, Dad, wake up, wake up. I don't know where Mom is. I don't know where she is. And he just got out of bed and he got dressed like he knew what he was doing. Put on his coat, put his wallet in his pocket, and went out around the back to the garage and backed the car out of the garage driveway, backed out, and I was just standing there not knowing what the hell's going on. My mother was missing, and there was 2 feet of snow on the ground. Well, I had to call my girlfriend and say, I can't pick you up to go to work today because I'm not going to work because my mom's missing and we don't know where she is or what's going on. And so just tell the boss I won't be there. Then about 40 minutes later, the phone rang and it was my dad. He said, I'm at the hospital, your mother's dead. Just like that. I'm at the hospital, your mother's dead. I fell on the floor and I cried so hard that I bruised myself. I was bruised all over. And I didn't know what to do with myself. He said, your aunt and a cousin are going to show up there in a minute. So I started cleaning the house. Because that's what I do when I'm totally traumatized. I have to do things. Nobody asked me how I was. No aunts, no uncles, my dad. Nobody talked about the fact that it ended up that my mother did take her own life that night. I'm not going to go into any details. And I don't remember much about the next few days, strangely enough. I do remember there was a funeral. I do remember I would not cry. I was so angry. I was furious at my mother and at everybody around her because they said, just tell everybody she died of a heart attack. And I said, I'm going to tell everybody what happened. Because I want everybody to know how I feel. Because nobody's asking me how I feel. I was 17 going on 18. This was 1972. And let me tell you, right now, in the support group that I help run, I still get people telling me that they're told to tell a lie about their person who died. So no one was talking about it. Nobody was asking me about it. I went back to school and nobody was talking to me. Kids would just go down the hall and turn the corner to get away from me. Nobody wanted to know what was happening to me. Because in those days, and even now, the stigma was so strong. People would look at me and think, oh, what's wrong with her? Her mother killed herself. Is it catching? Is it something that runs in families? We don't know. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I'm not here to talk about that science. I've got some other science to talk about. So that was my experience when I lost my mom. It was extremely traumatic, of course. And I just knew from the anger that I felt for so many decades that I was bad. So I started with bad when I take these classes, I'll learn something about families. So I took family classes and I took some social work classes. And when we got to the point where we were studying family systems and attachment theory, I thought, oh, this might have something to do with why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling. And that's when I wrote one of my papers about my mother that got published. I was just hoping that I could understand what was going on in my life. So from here, I kind of want to, I guess it's just that one. No, wrong one. Which one do I push? Oh, there we go. Oh, that should have been up here this whole time I was telling my story. I'm sorry. Let's see who we are. Oops, wrong way. Oh, I see. It's worn off. The side you want to go forward is worn off because everyone else goes forward. Okay, who are we? Who are we? Suicide survivors, the suicide loss survivors, okay? We happen to be the largest group of victims at risk of physical and mental health declines. Did anybody know that? The largest group of victims at risk of physical and mental health declines. I would say that that is a big social problem as well as a public health problem. Why don't we know this? The big S word, stigma, right? Nobody wants to talk about it. 5.5 million individuals are exposed to a suicide in their own social group annually in the US. That's quite a few people. Better than that, 51% of Americans will be exposed to at least one suicide during their lifetime. That's half the population of America. Why are we not talking about this? That's why I call this talk. We need to talk. We need to talk. All right. Sorry, I just have to have notes because I get lost very easily. Hey, what's it like? What's it like to be a suicide loss survivor? Can I take a moment here and get a show of hands? You don't have to, but I like to know. How many people here have lost a loved one to suicide? How many here, keep your hands up please. How many here know of someone who's lost a loved one to suicide? Wow. Okay, and keep your hands up, one more to go. How many here are aware of some public figure that has taken their life? Oh, look at that, everybody. We're all suicide loss survivors. And this room is, we're full. So we understand that we feel abandonment, we feel rejection, we self-blame, we feel guilt, and we suffer from depression, we suffer from tremendous anxiety and fear, suicide ideation, and status changes due to the stigma. We lose friends and family. But this, Dr. Schneidman's a father of suicidology. He was the first person who started a call-in center for people who were suicidal, and then he was really the first person who studied suicide loss survivors. In 1970s, around there, he said, the person who takes their own life puts their psychological ghosts in the survivor's closet. When I read that, when I was starting my research for my thesis on suicide loss survivors, I just got chills. I mean, I couldn't agree more. I carried my mother's ghost around in my closet for decades. I lived out her life and her unhappiness, and I worried and I thought and I wondered and why and what could I have done. That ghost lived with me forever. It's still a little bit in there. And what we lose and what we gain. We lose support. We lose support of our loved one. We lose companionship, depending on what your relationship is. We lose physical cuddling and closeness. We could lose our home. We lose our financial security, social status. Because when people find out that you've lost a loved one to suicide, they may come around. They may come around and go, "Oh, we're so sorry. We're so sorry." But do you continue to get the invitations? Sometimes that stops. They don't want to be bummed out by having you show up. You lose your sense of self. Losing your sense of self. Now, there's a researcher named Jacobi. German woman, in 2012 talked about the loss can shake the foundations on which the self of the survivor is constructed and known. Because when you lose someone you're really close to, especially in a traumatic way, you lose that mirroring back who you are. Now, if you lose someone who's been sick for a long, long time, you know you're going to lose that mirroring. But when you lose someone to suicide, and it's like sudden, it's gone. All of a sudden, who are you? Here's that person who shows you who you are. Family and friends. We think that people are going to support us. But the family, if it's another family member, everybody grieves differently, and they might not be available to grieve with you because they have their own grieving. So you find yourself alone. You end up grieving alone. Friends. You find out who your friends are, I'll tell you that. And your emotional security. But look what we gain. We gain fear. Fear of the future. Fear of the ability to go out the door and not be afraid that something bad's going to happen. We gain our depression, PTSD. How many people find their loved ones? I found my mother in 2 attempts. I have images in my head that, man, I'll never get rid of it. There's no emotion attached to it. It was so long ago, but there's an image there. We gain vulnerability in life. You don't know what's going to happen next. Everything changes. And then, of course, there's that social stigma. The social stigma. That's why we need to talk. And one other thing we lose that I didn't put on my slide is I lost my trust in myself to make decisions for myself. I lost my own trust because I made a really bad decision by not going out here that night, that snowy night. I'll always regret that. Why didn't I go out there? This is very typical. So, there. Finding support. Okay, we're on the upswing now. Finding support. So according to myself and some other researchers, the ability to share with life-experienced individuals creates a sense of support, bringing about protection from complicated grief and other deleterious effects of suicide loss. So getting support and being able to share with people who have experienced the same loss is probably one of the most important things you can do as a suicide loss survivor. Now, this is what helped me, was finding support, but it took me way too long. I hope other people never have to go through what the decades I did. So I'll just go into a little more personal stuff here now. So after my first article was published that I wrote for my professor, I had to decide what to do my research, my thesis research on. And at that point, it was like, okay, well, it has to be suicide loss. I mean, I've waited all these decades to think about it and talk about it. Now I've got something published, I have to do it. So that meant I would have to do some research and I'd have to find some other suicide loss survivors. I had no idea where to look, except I just started looking it up and I found a website, AFSP.org. You're all familiar with AFSP. If you're not, there's a nice table out there with information. And through that website, I found a wonderful person. I don't know if she's here. Is Anne-Marie here? Anne-Marie Anchors? No, she told me she'd be here. Well, anyway, I was introduced to Anne-Marie by email, and the first thing when because I emailed her to say, yes, I'm interested in your group, I'm interested in she's get back to me, I have this thesis I have to do, so on and so forth. The first thing she said in her email, even though I told her it had been, I guess it was 48 years in or 49 years that I'd lost my mother in 72, she said, I'm so sorry for your loss. And that hit me so hard. No one had ever said that to me about my mother's death. And I thought, oh, we're gonna be friends. We're gonna be friends. So we met and we talked, and she was so wonderful to help me find participants for my research. And we talked often. And one day she said, by the way, Dorothy, we have this really great event coming up. It's called Survivor Day. And I'm like, oh, okay. Does anybody else here know what Survivor Day is? Raise your hand if you know what Survivor Day is. Oh my God, we need to educate you all. I don't have time to go into it right now. Go to AFSP.org Survivor Day, and you'll get an invitation. So Anne Marie said, you should come to Survivor Day. It would be great. It'd be lots of people, and it's, you know, we're all, there's not lost survivors. And we have it at the church where we normally have the solace meetings, and you should come. And I'm like, oh, okay. I thought, but she's been so nice and so hospitable to me, I'll do that. I'll go to Survivor Day for her, just for Anne Marie. So I went, this was 2019, and I got there late. Poor Robert was in the middle of his keynote speech. I remember, I'll never forget, because I sat down and I was like, oh my God, there's a room as big as this, filled with suicide loss survivors, and not sitting at round tables, sitting in pews in church. I was a little disconcerted, and I started shaking a little bit, but I just sat there and I thought, okay, I'll be fine. Then what they do is we go off into breakout rooms of like losses. I found myself in a room with 40 or 50 other people who had lost parents, a mother or a father. And we sat in a big circle and everyone was sharing. And it came around time for me to share. And I looked in my lap and I thought, what was the biggest feeling I had when my mother died? And I started to talk about something I had no idea I was going to talk about. I talked about relief. I felt relief that I didn't have to live in that chaotic, alcohol-fueled, crazy environment anymore. As being an only child, I didn't have any support. It was just my mom and dad fighting, and my mom drinking and raging, and then I was so ashamed. All of a sudden, I was just so hot because I thought, how did I say that? And then when I looked up, I saw people nodding their heads like, oh yeah, we know what you're talking about. And right then, I felt, I'm getting goosebumps right now. I felt this lifting of shame, not all of it, but I just felt a big lifting of shame come off of me. And that's when my healing started, because I was in a group of people that knew exactly what I was talking about. I couldn't tell a therapist, I couldn't tell my doctor, I couldn't tell a friend, I couldn't even tell my father what was going on in me, but I could tell this group of strangers, this whole room full of strangers, what I really was feeling, and they got it. And I belonged to a group no one wants to belong to, but yeah, but I belonged. And I felt rooted on the ground, and I felt like I had support. So Solace, the support group, which was started by Robert Shore, and Anne Marie, it met at the same church where Survivor Day was. And I started going every Saturday, religiously. I went every week, and I shared, and I shared, and I listened. And I started to feel compassion. Something I used to see when I was really angry and in the midst of my pain, I would see people being really kind and loving to one another and compassionate, and I would think, how do you do that? I didn't have any idea how people did that. I didn't grow up like that in my immediate family, and I was so tight and so hard and tough inside. I had no idea how people knew how to do that. But all of a sudden, this room started to soften because I heard other people's stories, and they heard mine, and we really listened to each other. And that's how I started to heal. It wasn't by writing the thesis, it was by doing the research, and the research took me to what I really, really needed, and that was suicide loss survivor support group. But you don't have to take my word for it. Okay. There is science behind this, okay? I'm going to read a little bit now because I'm going to be talking about researchers. Research has shown that self-disclosure, that is telling our secrets, those secret painful feelings, has important functions in how a survivor responds to the distress of suicide loss. So a couple of researchers in 2019 found that those who did participate in self-disclosure of their emotions were much more likely to find relief from the feelings of shame, blame, and guilt. And in fact, self-disclosure was found to serve as a protective factor against complicated grief over time. That is very, very important to know because I don't know if any of you know, but complicated grief is now in the DSM. And they want to give people drugs if they suffer from complicated grief. But guess what? If you talk about it with people who know what your experience is, who understand your experience and have experienced it themselves, maybe you don't need to take those meds. So the doctors aren't here anymore, are they? So I was finally able to face what I had been through. And I found out that I was not alone, okay? And that's how support works, right? That's just how it works. So in my own research for my thesis, and I interviewed 14 people, in that research, my participants agreed with this information about self-disclosure and social interaction. One person said participating in the support group took a lot of pressure off. Another one said, it's a place where I can belong. And my involvement's been very healing for me. I felt comforted. And last but not least, we're not alone. We're not the only one. So this brings me now to the theory. There is an actual scientific theory behind how support groups work. I'm sorry, this keeps going up and down. I hope your hearing is not disturbed anyway. A researcher, Collins, in 1990 came up with this theory, the interaction ritual chain theory. And he explains how group therapy works by this ritual chain reaction here. It's not nearly as complicated as it sounds. So all you need are 4 things. First thing is 2 or more people. That's easy. 2 or more loss survivors. Get them together. The second thing is all the participants are focused on the same activity and they're aware of one another's attention. This is the ritual. This is like a ritual in any kind of a situation you give. 2 or more people together, you're all focused on the same activity, right? You're aware of one another's attention. Now you have a ritual. Number 3, all participants share a common mood and they get caught up in one another's feelings. And number 4, what these actions create is feelings of solidarity, that you belong. This is why the group works, okay? 2 or more people together, you're all focused on the same thing, you're all aware of the same thing, you're aware of each other, you're aware of each other's attention, you get caught up in one another's feelings, and you have solidarity. In a suicide loss survivor group, the short-term emotion will be grief. Everybody comes in with their grief. And the ritual work of the group is restoring group solidarity by being attentive to one another and to all the same things. We're restoring solidarity. Now, we feel that belonging. And with the group solidarity, with feeling belonging, miraculously, there's an increase in emotional energy, which is the renewed sense of socially based enthusiasm. So you come in with your grief, you practice the ritual of talking to one another, paying attention to one another, of all having your attention on your grief. And everyone comes away with a renewed sense they belong, and they have a renewed sense of enthusiasm. And I've seen this happen. I see this happen every Saturday that I hold group, that I'm co-facilitating in a group. Oh, I only have 5 minutes left. Oh dear, I went way too long on my stories. Sorry about that. Okay. Okay, we're gonna go really fast now. So we need to talk. I did a very quick and dirty research project, and during COVID, we had so many people joining us on Zoom that the facilitators, we would send emails to one another after the Saturday meeting of what we had talked about. And I thought that was really interesting that we could use that information. I thought that if we knew what suicide loss survivors needed to talk about, and we shared that with providers, family, clergy, medical doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists, teachers, if everybody who ran into these people could know what they need to talk about, we could help care for them. We could help them feel more like they belong in the world, even though they feel out of the world. So these are what we need to talk about. Stigma. We've heard a lot about stigma today. It's a bitch. And it's in every kind of grief, but it's the worst in suicide grief. Trauma, PTSD, not being able to sleep, high blood pressure, low blood pressure. Trauma will create all kinds of physical and mental problems for us. Guilt and shame. Guilt is when you know you didn't do something and it was a bad thing. Shame is when you're the bad person because you didn't do it. So for me, I had all those guilt, shame, and blame. Disappointment. The disappointment of, first of all, maybe the medical care your loved one did or did not get. Maybe the meds they did or did not get. Maybe it's the disappointment that your friend can't support you. Disappointment that your family's not talking to you because they're blaming you. Oh, blame. Forgot about blame. Do you know that family members blame other family members for suicides? It's shocking. It's shocking. Fear of the future. Fear of, like I said, fear of your own thinking capabilities. Fear of, well, I'll get personal again. I have a daughter with mental health issues, and she's still lives with me. She's 32 years old. Failure to launch, but she's doing great now. But even now, after she's got everything leveled out, if she doesn't get up in the morning by a certain time, I have to go look and make sure she's breathing. It's always going to be that way for me. Complicated grief. Well, the complications of grief and the difficult feelings in the grief. This one's complicated. I have to look down. Those ones like anger and relief. Is it so complicated? We would feel anger because someone died, or relief because someone died. We need to talk about that. And the difficult feelings when you come up on anniversaries and birthdays and holidays and such, those difficult feelings. That's a lot of times I won't see a participant in the group for months and months, and then all of a sudden they show up and say, yeah, well, birthday's coming up in a couple of weeks and I need a little extra support. So we're able to give that. Now, the reconstruction, this is really important. Who am I now? That's the big question. Well, actually, the first big question is why? And I didn't even bother getting into that here, but why? Why did they die? Why didn't I help? Why? Why is a question that never ever gets answered, so we're not going to ask it. But reconstruction, who am I now? Humans need to create some sort of meaning from the events in our lives, right? Our brain just wants to create a story. We need a story. So this is where we get to write our own story, and we get to improve on our story. We get to, maybe we want to recreate ourselves. Maybe we want to change careers. Maybe we want to get an education. Maybe there's just, we get to determine how our stories go and how we're going to live the rest of our lives. And how do we build that better? And I always say the best way to honor our lost loved one is to live a life worth living, is to live better. Then we have to honor our loved ones. And that's, I just say it's by living a good life, but there's always different ways of honoring it. And sometimes it's the sweetest conversation because people say, well, I saw a butterfly yesterday and it made me think of my mom. You know, I was down at the beach and I saw that heart-shaped stone and that was my daughter. She was always picking up heart-shaped stones. So we constantly live, we keep them alive inside of us with these beautiful little, what some people might call corny, but it's not corny. It's beautiful. It's heart and soul. And people can talk about that in our group and we're not going to go, oh, there she goes again. We love it. I love it when people do that. Then it's self-compassion and self-care. That's what I always wanted. I wanted self-compassion. I wanted compassion for others. I wanted to be able to feel love. I was so hardened by my mother's death that I thought I would never feel it. I thought I was going to go through life just being like a robot, just doing the things I had to do. Have a career, get married, have the kids, do this, do this, do this. I gained it. Am I wrapping up? I'm wrapping up. I gained self-care and self-compassion through self-care. We talk about how to look after yourself, drink a lot of water, look after yourself, get support. But the one other thing that we talk about, we'll just have to take another second. We learned that healing is not a betrayal. When we start to heal, we're not betraying our loved one. And that's what Stan talked about. He had, for one whole day, didn't think of his friend and he got angry with himself. But that's such a good sign because we are never going to forget our loved ones who died by suicide. There's not a chance in hell that we're going to forget those people. They're always in our heart, right here. Just going to put this up, okay? If you need a group, get in a group. If you have support, start a group. This is my call to action. Start a group. If you don't know how to start a group, go to AFSP.org, facilitating a suicide bereavement support group. Figure out how to do it. And this is where you can find a support group. These are some websites you can go to. Educate, share, inspire, help each other. And that's about all I have to say. I mean, I could go on and on, but that's all I have to say this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Dorothy. I just want to know Anne-Marie Anguish is on the webinar, so she has.
Get yourself there. I know Maria has a couple questions online and then we'll go to the audience.
So the next one, thank you for sharing and my sincere sorry for your loss. From your experience, what visible signs could you tell us of someone who is at risk of suicide?
That's not really my wheelhouse. I'm here as loss, and people before me have done a very nice job of what the signs of suicide would be. I can only repeat. I mean, I've done a ton of reading on it, but change in behavior, change. Yeah, I don't want to waste any time. There might be more people who have more questions about loss.
Right here, we have one of you.
Yeah, I have a question about if this is maybe in your wheelhouse, the intergenerational effects. I'm thinking of someone I know whose mother and brother committed suicide, never, ever talked about it. It was discovered long after he had died, but wondering what the impact would have been on his kids. If you have any notions about that.
Well, what I know about that is mental health issues can be inherited. You know, my daughter has them, my mother had them. I got skipped a little bit. But also I think what happens is now my mother took her own life. Her grandfather took his own life. So once she knew her grandfather took his own life, that became a solution. Once someone you know, then, and you may have never thought of it before, but once someone you know is supposed to has taken it, then all of a sudden it could become a solution. It doesn't have to be depression. It can become a solution, just for that pain, you know, well, why not? So that would be my answer to that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Questions, any questions?
Question online. How do you create a safe space to explore aspects of grief and loss despite the stigma?
Well, I would say find a group. And that's why I'm saying that we need to start more groups. Or if you're in an area where you don't know of any other lost survivors, there are groups online, and that's the beauty of it. If you go to the website, AFSP.org, find a support group, you will find lots of groups online. And one of the great things about the internet, so that would be a safe place to visit, to be able to express yourself and to listen to other stories. And in some cases, you don't have to share if you don't want. I mean, in our group, you don't have to share. You can just listen. And that'd be a good place to start. If you want just private with a therapist, try to find someone who specializes in trauma and grief. Better still, try to find someone who is a suicide loss survivor. That's ideal. I was lucky enough to find someone like that, but there aren't many around. So, good luck.
Last question. Is it harder to help an elderly client or a younger one through SI?
It's all hard. Doesn't matter if I think whether someone is younger and has lost someone like me and lost my mother, or whether it's someone who's lived their whole life with a partner and then lost their partner. It's either way, it's going to be difficult, no? It's never easy, and it never really goes away. We just learn to live. The grief just sort of lives in us. Becomes kind of I don't like to say friend, but yeah, it kind of does. Because it knows us and we know it, and we live together. So, any more questions? Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you to Dr. Goulah.